Welcome to another episode of the Take a Look podcast, where we're talking real estate, architecture, and housing. If you haven't been paying attention, there is a provincial election happening this week, the 27th of February, where we are going to the polls to elect a new provincial government. Today on the podcast, we have the incumbent, Tyler Allsopp, our current MPP, who's represented us since the last by-election last fall, and he is putting his name back in the ring to go for another bout. So welcome to the show, Tyler. I'm glad you had some time to join us.
Absolutely. No, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on today, and I think it'll be a great conversation.
Awesome. Well, I guess the first thing, let's get to know you a little bit. I know a bit about who you are, but tell me a bit about your background. How did you get to here? What's your background in? And
Yeah, so I'll give you a bit of an overview, and then I'll talk specifically about how I got involved in local politics. So my name is Tyler Allsopp. I'm 32 years old. I live over in West Park Village with my wife, Jennifer. We've got 3 daughters under 5. I'm a former small business owner for 12 years at Doug's Bicycle over on College Street. I was also a city councilor for Belleville for almost 4 years and chair of the Police Services Board. And I got involved in politics almost 20 years ago exactly. I was 12 years old, and we did not have a skate park in Belleville. And so my friends and I would be riding our bikes all over town at the library, Nicholson High School, and we would be getting kicked out. And they would say, hey, you can't ride here. You have to go somewhere else. And it occurred to me that we didn't really have anywhere to go. And so on the weekends, we might be able to go to Trenton, or Madoc at the time had a park before us, but we didn't have one here. So I got involved with a group called the Can't Wait to Skate Committee, and we were out there selling bracelets and going around to local businesses to see if they would sponsor us. And about 4 years later, our skate park was built and fully constructed, and those ended up being some of my first public speaking events, was hosting contests at the local skate park.
so is that kind of like the little taste of it, just to kind of
So
you could actually get something made? I mean, I don't know if I can say I am a skater anymore, but I was a skater
at one time. Sure.
I'm pro more skate parks for sure. But was that kind of like the thing that got you into kind of, hey, I can be involved and actually make some change?
Yeah, the ability to actually affect change and, to get involved in your community, and then to see those results and the way that can shape not only your life, but the lives of so many other people. There's a whole generation of kids now that never grew up without a skate park in Belleville. And we've added some things, the pump track and, the mountain bike skills park as well. So just getting involved, putting your name out there, and then showing up, keep going to the meetings. There was one meeting where the skateboarders wanted to cut out the bowl section of the skate park. I was the only BMX rider there. I said, no, we've got to keep this. This is something BMX riders will really want. And so we ended up shrinking it by about 40%, if I recall correctly. So that was my first political compromise, but I was the only one for it. Everyone else was against it. I got to keep it. We just had to shrink it down a little bit. So
yeah, I think the skate and BMX community may be a little more friendly towards each other nowadays, but I think when we were growing up, there's a big divide. And don't even get me started on scooter riders. Right?
Oh my good. Well, so if people say, can you work across party lines? I used to work with skateboarders as a BMXer, so I can absolutely work with anybody. Yeah, no problem there.
So you ran Doug's Bicycle for a number of years.
Yes.
How did you get into running that?
Well, yeah, so, I got involved at the skate park. I was riding my bike, and I actually started selling BMX parts online. And so I went into the post office one day. I was probably 15 or so, and the son of the owner of the of Doug's Bicycle was working at the post office. And he said, hey, are you still into bikes? Like, what's going on with that? And I said, well, yeah, I'm actually selling some bike parts online right now. And he goes, well, they're looking for someone down there. You should go down and apply. So went down, applied. I started working there right away. Did that for a couple summers. Went off to marketing school at St. Lawrence College. And then when I came back, the mayor at the time, Neil Ellis, was the owner of Doug's Bicycle. He was interested in running federally as the MP. And he said, I'm going to pursue politics a little bit more, and I won't have time to run the business. Is anyone interested in buying it? And I was 19 at the time. I did not have any funds available to me. So I reached out to my network, and I found a partner, Jim Forbes, who was a fantastic partner, retired banker. So he was 59 and I was 19 at the time. Found some money. I was able to borrow it over about a 10-year period, and we got to work.
And how long did you run the business for?
For 12 years.
12 years. Wow.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty big jump, though, going from private sector, running your business, to throwing your name in the ring for politics. What went into your decision to, get involved on the civic side?
Well, and it came from extension of some of the challenges that we had as kids, feeling like there wasn't anything to do in Belleville, that youth voices weren't being heard. And so all of a sudden, at about 21 years old, I had a home in town. I was running a small business. And I thought, you know what? I'm the kind of guy that maybe people would think is a reasonable person to represent young people. I've got some life experience. I've got a bit of a business background. Why don't I put my name forward? Yeah, I had this experience with the skate park already, understood the value of getting involved. And so I said, well, you know what? Why not? Why don't I try out? It's 2014. I'll put my name in for council. And we ran. It was a really good campaign. But of course, at that age, I didn't know what I didn't know. Door knocking was not something that was top of mind for me. So I thought, well, if I go to the speaking events and I speak well, I talk to people around town, that's probably going to be good enough. And it wasn't. But there was 22 people running. They take the top 6, and I came 10th at 21 years old in a race where really nobody knew me. And so that was, again, encouraging enough that I thought, you know what, I'm going to keep putting myself forward. I really believe that we do need young representation in town. And I felt that there was a real openness to that from some of the people I talked to. A lot of older people would come up to me at the speaking events and say, our son or daughter, wanted to stay here, but they felt that they couldn't because, there weren't jobs here, there weren't houses that were affordable to them. And even at that time when houses were much more affordable, as you can recall. And so that spurred me on and made me feel like, there is a place for a young person in local politics. So I ran in 14 and lost. I ran in 18 and they take the top 6. I came 7th. And so unfortunately I was on the outside looking in again. But, I'd almost doubled my vote tally. I was within striking distance. And again, we still didn't have any youth representation on council. And then about 2 years later, I was appointed. Because the tragic passing of Pat Culhane, who was a fantastic counselor and a great lady in our community. And so I found myself with a seat on council, worked very hard at that for a year and a half. And then in 2022, I was up for election again and was able to top the polls and was the youngest person to ever be elected in the history of Belleville.
What was that experience like, being not just as a young person in council, but being in council, period? Like, this is a whole different world, basically, from running a business to actually being in the public sphere and actually having a bit of authority and power to make some decisions there. What was that experience like?
Well, for sure. And I came in after the appointment process, which, if you remember, was a little bit acrimonious. Mm-hmm. So not everybody was happy to see me when I got there. Right. So that was an interesting environment to go into as well. But, the thing about government is that it moves much slower than business by design. Yeah. Right? So if you run your own business, you go, okay, we need to
you're saying the public sector doesn't move as quickly as the private? I'm shocked.
So you said it, and I'll agree with you. How about that? But, that is by design, right? Because you can really change the direction of government very quickly if you ran it just like a business, and that may not be in the right direction. And so there are safeguards in place, and, these things need to play out. You have public consultations. Whereas, if you run your own business, as you know, you go, okay, I'm going to put out some advertising. I'm going to do a special. I'm going to try to bring people in. We're going to host an event. That stuff takes longer when you're involved in politics. And so that was something that was a bit jarring for me at first. I thought we're going to get in there. We're going to get some things done really quickly. Takes a little bit more time. Also, the relationship building aspect of it, making sure that, you have connections with the other counselors, that they understand where you're coming from as well, that you're articulating your points well, and then just the structure of it. Because, there's things that you don't know before you get in there. And so I remember my first council meeting, someone had suggested to me, what you want to do is to break the ice, get involved right away. Start moving things, seconding things, and then you'll start to fall into the groove. If there's a deputation, maybe ask them a question. It's a low-risk environment. Just start getting involved and you'll feel more comfortable. I thought, okay, great. So they said, okay, we need to move the minutes of our previous meeting. My hand shot right up, right? Well, you can't move the minutes of a meeting that you weren't at. So, right? So I'm going to jump right in. We're going to get started here. And then the first thing I did, they went, well, actually, you can't do that because this is your first meeting. So you can't move the minutes of a meeting that you weren't at, because how would you know if they're accurate, right? And so right away, that learning curve started.
Yeah. I guess in your time at council, what was the big takeaway? What did you learn maybe that you found surprising when you actually got into behind the curtain a little bit? What did you realize, or what was different than you expected?
Well, certainly, the amount of time that things take and why that's important, right? I think it's easy to dismiss, they should just do it faster. Once you're in there, you understand that if you rush into some of these decisions, you can permanently affect the way that people live their lives in a negative way very quickly. So that was certainly one of them. The other thing is that, municipal council is nonpartisan. So, everyone comes from their own perspective, but there's nothing, that's partisan about the way that we make decisions. And I really enjoyed that sort of collaborative atmosphere. There was councillors that routinely, we would find each other on the other side of issues. But that wasn't ever a stumbling block, really. We could always get through that. Whereas at the provincial level, that is different. It is partisan, and that has a big role to play. It's more of a team sport. In that regard with your own team, whereas on city council it was much more collaborative, and we all kind of tried to drive forward together, which was really nice.
So, a couple of years in council.
Yep.
Then the by-election came up last September.
Yeah.
How did that happen? How did you get your why did you put your name in the ring for that, and how did that happen?
Yeah, so I'd sold my business in July, and that was the first piece of that. So we had really kind of closed the deal for July 1st, but there's always additional paperwork and back and forth with the lawyers, and so that really finished up on July 30th. And so I announced on social media that I'd sold the business. Thank you to everybody who made the business what it was over the years and all the customers. And Todd Smith had seen that post and reached out to me and said, well, I'm actually thinking of taking a job in the private sector, so there may be an opportunity opening up. Would you be interested? And so I talked it over with my family and said, well, would I run for the nomination, and would I be interested in running for MPP of the Bay of Quinte? And we all decided that was something that, our family could pull off at the time. And it really is a whole family decision. My wife is at home with our 3 daughters, and, there's a lot of pressure when you're in politics. There's a lot of scrutiny. Even when you're out at the grocery store, people are asking me what I think about tariffs and what we're going to do about local infrastructure projects and things like that. And so we need to make sure that everyone was comfortable with that aspect of it. And then also the fact that you're away quite a lot. We sit in the legislature about 100 days a year. And so that first stretch, we did 4 weeks straight. And so I would come back Thursday evening after the kids were asleep, be there for 2 days, but, Friday, full day in the office, Saturday, usually full day at events, a little bit of time with the family on Sunday morning, and then drive back to Toronto for the next week.
How much convincing did it take to get your wife on board with that? Because you have young kids, right?
Yeah, yeah. My oldest is 5. We have twin 3.5-year-olds.
Oh, wow. Oh, you have twins.
Yeah. And so the first one was amazing. We thought, well, we could do that again. We could have a second one. And then we got twins on the second round, and very quickly it was unmanageable.
Yeah.
But it's just amazing. It didn't take a lot of convincing, because I've always been that kind of a guy. I mean, my wife knew who she married, and that I'm a guy who, takes big shots and is willing to take risks. And, I've always been someone who has had confidence in myself that, I took a look at and thought, we have an opportunity here. This doesn't come around all the time. I've always been a PC member. And so, of course, when Todd Smith is in office, there's no opportunity for me to run against him, obviously, and he's a great member, so I wouldn't. So that was an opportunity that was available. So once it became available, I thought, you know what, let's go for it. And she was very supportive of that. Yeah. We've had to be, much more structured in terms of when I'm home, this is the time with the kids, making sure that, devices are off, that you're not, your mind isn't somewhere else, and making that quality time really quality time. But it's a tough balance for people with a family, for sure. No question about it.
Yeah, I like that you brought up, what you liked about council was that it is a nonpartisan body of government, right? And, well, your predecessor at the bike shop, he went and ran for the Liberal Party. Yes, he was
a Liberal, absolutely.
Why the PCs? Why did you go the Conservative route?
Well, I think, it's in fitting with my background. Small business owners, I'm concerned about taxation. I'm concerned about making sure that we're an area where capital can grow, because I've always believed that capital goes where it can grow. And so I think that aligns very much with what the PCs have done. And we've seen that over the last 7 years in government, that they have not increased taxes, but have significantly grown the base. So the budget was about $160 billion in 2018. We're up over $212 billion today without increasing taxes, and while also cutting fees. And so that speaks to my nature. And then also my time as chair of the Police Services Board. This was the party that was really calling for more law and order, pushing the federal government on bail reform, making sure that we're not, just catching people and releasing them, because that was the number one thing that officers would talk to me about during my time as chair of the Police Services Board, is how frustrating that was, that you would arrest somebody who, might have been out front of an apartment building uttering threats and being a public nuisance and danger to themselves. A couple hours later, they're back on the street. You're arresting them again for exactly the same thing. And then also issues with advocating against the federal carbon tax. As a small business owner, we appreciate how much that tax affects small businesses, at every stage of production and shipping and packaging. It really is a regressive tax and affects the pricing on everything. And then, lots of other issues as well, like their stance on building homes, the commitment to build 1.5 million new homes by 2031. Obviously, that was a very bold goal, and we've had some challenges attaining those numbers. But we're going to keep pushing forward, cutting through regulation, making sure that we are fostering an environment that allows builders to focus on what they want to do, which is build.
Mm-hmm. So you've been the MPP since the by-election in September. What has that experience been like, and how has that differed from the municipal side? And has that long enough for you to actually to get your hands in on to do stuff to represent the Bay of Quinte, or has it been more of a learning curve? What is this past 6 months now? I guess what does that look like for you?
Well, it's a great question, and it's hard to sum it all up, in a short period of time. But there's a lot of things that I think that people expect that there is a real education piece that happens. And I don't know maybe if there is when you come in all as a group in a general election, but I came in off a by-election and I was just right into it right away. There was no, we're doing a 3-day course or a 7-day course. It was just great. You're the MPP. This is where your seat is. Off you go. So that was really exciting. Similar to what happened to me when I came onto council, I was appointed. So I didn't go through the initial, introductory period that other people had. They sort of handed me a binder and said, okay, you're a councilor now, do councilor stuff. And so that's been very interesting. And also when I got to Queen's Park, I was already the parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Long-Term Care. So I had a portfolio to work on as well. And that minister had since gone on mat leave and had a beautiful baby boy in January. So right away, I was getting active on that portfolio, touring all around Ontario, visiting homes, doing grand openings, groundbreakings. I even flew up about 1,000 kilometers north to Hearst, Ontario, to open up some new beds up there. And I showed up and was talking to the mayor, and I could hear he had a very thick Francophone accent, and everyone else in the room was speaking French. And I said, Mayor, what percentage of this room is Francophone? He went, 95%. And so all of a sudden I'm having to do my speech in French because I realized, I prepared an English speech and that's not going to work in this room. So we're very busy on that right away. And in terms of representing the Bay of Quinte, I believe I was the MPP that did the most member statements in the House in the legislature during the fall period. I did 5 of them and used that time to highlight a lot of the great businesses and events that we had here, talked about the Quinte Business Achievement Awards and promoted all those great businesses through our area, the Best in the Bay Awards, talked about helping the military get back on their feet after they finish their service, reintegrate into civilian life, which is certainly an important issue with CFB Trenton so close by. I got right on the advocacy piece right away. And then, on all those specific issues, we talk about like County Road 49, which had been an issue for a while, locating a hard hub in Belleville. Those were things I had to hit the ground running on day one. Start calling ministers, start calling teams and saying, hey, this is what we need. This is why we need it. Here's the impact it'll have on the area. Some of these processes, particularly for the hard hub, were very competitive processes. There was a lot of interest in them. A lot of municipalities had submitted applications. And so trying to make sure that you were, stick handling and presenting the issues in the correct way, that we were going to be more likely to get that investment. That began right away, and thankfully we were very successful on a number of those files early on. But yeah, it was really just get in there, hit the ground running. I think the thing that surprised me most right away is the amount of heckling in the legislature. It's just not something you have any of in city council, right? If someone else is getting up, no one is heckling them, try to throw them off. It's a real thing in the legislature, and because
what's your take on that?
Well, I think it's largely unfortunate because it doesn't allow people to get their points out. And for people who are less confident public speakers, it is a real challenge. And you can see it, and often, members are not quiet while they're doing it. So it also impacts the audio quality. So, if the premier is speaking, and so, just for reference sake, if you haven't seen it, because of the majority that we have, I am over on the other side with the independents, the opposition, and the liberals and the Greens and everything. So if the premier, who's on the other side of the house, is speaking, I'm getting the heckling in surround sound from both sides of me because I'm right in between those other two groups. And so for the first 3 days, I didn't hear a word the premier said during question period. And that was really surprising to me, and I really didn't know how to handle this because, from my perspective, it's inappropriate. But that is how they do it up there. And I think that part of it is to try and distract whoever's speaking. The other part of it is it ruins the audio quality, so then you can't use that clip of you speaking in the legislature to get your points out, get your messaging forward. So, I wish it didn't exist, but unfortunately, that is the way that it is. And I think we could have a more productive conversation if that wasn't happening. And I think it does contribute to some of the polarization that exists out there. There's a lot of people that I think not only feel passionate about a certain party or a certain set of ideas, but are also quite aggressive towards other parties. And I don't think that that's a necessary component. We can have differences of ideas. I respect everybody else who's in the race here in the Bay of Quinte. And I have great relationships with essentially everybody in the legislature, whether it's on the government side, opposition, independents. I've been happy to talk to everybody in the halls and that sort of thing. But yeah, the amount of heckling and the volume of it was something that really surprised me when I first got there.
Well, I want to ask you about partisanship in particular, because excuse me, on the municipal level, there is none of that. So it is very much just an ideas kind of based collaboration. Whereas as soon as you step into a party system, it is a team sport, like you say.
Yeah.
Now you owe a certain amount of allegiance to that party. Now, being a representative government structure that we have, how do you reconcile that with representing the Bay of Quinte versus what maybe your leader has to say? Because we've seen it on the federal level where the Liberals and Conservatives have made very clear statements that if you don't vote our way, you will be kicked out of caucus or you will be restricted, and potentially your career will suffer as a result. How do you reconcile those two things, especially when you have a very prominent and determined leader like Doug Ford,
Sure,
who says this is the way? What if that contradicts what you're riding, what the Bay of Quinte wants for us for a policy? How do you reconcile those two objectives?
No, and it's a great question and very fair question. And I think the one thing that I would say about Doug Ford is that he is, very direct. He is very determined. He's much more collaborative than I think people would realize. And that was one of the things that jumped out to me really at my first caucus meeting. So I was elected September 19th, but I don't actually get to Queen's Park until October 21st. So we're doing these virtual caucus meetings where we're all getting together, talking about ideas. And, there was a question that the Premier wanted to put to the entire group. Right. And so he said, here's what we're looking at. I want to get everyone's opinions on it. And the caucus leader, Will Bauman, said, well, we have about an hour to do that. So, everyone get your hands up and, can voice your opinion. You can ask questions, whatever it may be. And so by the end of that hour, there's still about 10 or 15 hands up. And the caucus leader said, well, Premier Ford has to get to an event. If you guys want to put this stuff in the chat. And the Premier said, no. Tell you what, I'll reach out to my team. They'll push the event back. This is really important. I see that some people haven't got to weigh in on this yet. I want everyone to have the opportunity. And so I think that that's something that, you're not going to hear in media interviews and out there. But he really does take the time to listen to everybody's opinions. He takes the time to get back to people in a very, very quick fashion. If I send him a text 3 to 5 minutes later, my phone bings. Doug Ford's right back to me, hey, great idea. Or, here's what we're looking at doing on that policy. He's very quick to respond. And quite frankly, a lot of that representation, especially when you're in government, occurs around the caucus table. So we'll be discussing policies, and you'll say, well, the implications of that in my riding are actually going to look more like this. Can we curtail this aspect of it? Can we add this additional programming in? And, especially when you look at, issues that are generally more regional. So, for instance, that affect all of Eastern Ontario differently than the GTA or Northern Ontario and that sort of thing. We'll sort of caucus together. So, it would be myself and maybe Dave Piccini and Steve Clark and some of the other MPPs from our area will say, in Eastern Ontario, this is really what we would like to see come forward out of that policy. And so a lot of that happens in those caucus meetings. And that's sort of like, if you're on a sports team, when you go into the locker room, you draw up the plays, right? How are we going to do this? Is this going to work for you? Are you going to be in this position? Everybody good? Okay. And then you go out and then you're in the game scenario, right? Mm-hmm. And when you're on the field, you do what you agreed to do in caucus, right? And so I think that by doing that, you have your opportunity to express the needs of the area, to really impact the policy before it gets to the floor. And then, we don't have a situation like no one has ever told me, vote this way or else, right? This won't happen for you or this will happen to you. That hasn't occurred.
That's kind of implied, though, in the system.
No.
Is it
So
not?
there's recommendations. They say, based on the conversation that we've had, based on the policy, we would recommend support for this or not support for that. And here's what the rationale is. But I'm not aware of anyone ever having been punished for voting a different way. I think that there's a reasonable expectation, though, and probably if that happens a number of times, you would say, well, why is it that you wanted to be part of this team and this agenda? Right? I mean, if you're not interested in our plan on transit, you're not interested in our plan on housing, you're voting against the fall economic statement, you didn't support us on the budget, why is that occurring? And so I'm sure that those conversations would be had at that point. But, on an issue here, on an issue there, I haven't been told anything in terms of, you have to do this or else. It's very much left up to the membership. But we are quite aligned. And I think that that's one thing about Premier Ford's leadership. He's very clear with us in terms of, here's what we think should be happening. And everybody gets on board.
Mm-hmm. So last, the by-election, I think we had about 38% voter turnout. Those numbers are garbage. Like, that's so low. I mean, on average, maybe not. But as far as the percentage of of eligible voters, why do you think that turnout is so low?
Well, and that was an interesting scenario because if you look at the other by-elections that occurred in that same year, we had the highest turnout. Some of them were into the 29s and 31s, and so we came through at 38, which was considered high for a turnout for a by-election. I would agree with you that is a garbage turnout. And certainly we want as many people as possible to vote.
Because you only won by like 2,000 votes, which
Sure.
with when you do the math, that's only 2 percentage points, I think.
Of the entire riding.
Exactly, right?
Yeah,
So
it's 6% of those who voted, 2% of the entire riding.
Right, like that's not a huge margin.
Yeah, well, and that is often the case, right? I mean, for a general, we usually crest about 48%, 50%, something close to that. Certain neighborhoods, the turnout is much higher. You see 80% turnout in certain polls and others much lower. And so it is a challenge. And, the one thing that I can say is I'm out door knocking every single day. I go to supporters' houses. I go to non-supporters' houses. I go to houses where we don't know, like we have no idea on that house. So I'm doing my best to get to as many people as possible to tell them, there's an election going on. Certainly, we would appreciate your vote, but regardless, you should go out and vote. But, some people don't feel the need, and I think there's a number of reasons for that. I talk to people who they say, I don't know enough about it, and if I'm not going to get informed, I don't want to go and impact the decision. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess that's one perspective. For some people, they just say, listen, I'm too busy and I don't care. And, I think that they have the right to do that. I mean, I would appreciate if they did go vote. But, that's their right. And then I think that there are a significant portion of people, and not just provincially or federally, and really, you see it in America as well. You see it all across developed countries and democracies that just don't feel like they should be doing it or that it makes a difference. And I think that's really disconcerting. Is the idea that, well, it doesn't matter either they think it's rigged maybe, or they think all you politicians are the same maybe, and sometimes I hear that at the doors. They go, yeah, I pick you, I pick someone else, you're all the same, doesn't make any difference. I always push back on that it certainly does make a difference. But I think that we could all do more to instill confidence in government where people felt that their vote was going to matter, and then maybe we would see more people come out. And I think that the partisanship is a part of that. If we can't agree on a base level of facts, I don't think that looks good to the public, and also, I think that sometimes the messaging is that, this system is broken and destroyed and horrible. Healthcare, education, pick one. When you actually step back and look at it, Ontario's healthcare system is about the 7th best one in the world. We have the shortest average wait time to access hospitals and surgeries in Canada, and we have the highest doctor attachment rate in Canada. Now, we need to improve.
I would say so.
We need to improve, no question, right?
Well, I would say like Ontario healthcare is wonderful if you're dying. So if for example, I am a cancer survivor and
Fantastic.
I was at KGH, they treated me amazing.
Right.
However, on the other side of that, I wanted to go see an allergist to just do a simple allergy test. They told me it was 36 months of a wait to see an allergist.
Brutal.
That's crazy.
That's crazy. No, and so absolutely, we need to do more work. But when you take a step back and look at it, it's one of the best systems in the world, and it's arguably the best system in the country. Some people say BC, but you can look at the numbers on that, and we're right there. So there is work to do, but to say that, it's absolutely garbage, it's horrible, people talk about cuts. We've increased the budget by 50% since 2018. There have not been cuts.
We'll speak on the healthcare side while we're there. I didn't want to go into the healthcare too much, but it's a hard thing to even hear that saying complimenting to the system itself, because it is.
People don't like it.
There are so many parts where it is broken. I think even over COVID, like I know Doug Ford gave the hospitals the authority to whether they're going to cut their non-vaccinated nursing staff or not.
Right.
Which I think he abdicated that decision and gave it to them. But what happened is we lost 30% of our nursing staff in Ontario, and most of them didn't come back. So is that not like a big shooting ourselves in the foot with healthcare? Like, how do we, as far as like, okay, we may have good services here and there when they're accessible, when we have nurses going from 4 beds to 8 beds, that's not sustainable just on the, like you've ran a business. How can you then make that work?
Well, yeah, and that's why we've made significant investments in the sector. We've hired 15,000 new doctors. We've hired about 100,000 new nurses. We have a plan for $4.9 billion to build out not only the healthcare system, but also the long-term care system from a staffing perspective, to hire up to 27,000 new nurses, PSWs, doctors. We've expanded 2 new medical schools in York University and also Metropolitan University in Toronto. We've increased the number of seats by 700 and earmarked 40% or 60% of those for family doctors. So there's a number of things that we are doing, and we're constantly trying to improve the healthcare system. But the point I was trying to make in the previous question is that something doesn't have to be ruined and horrible and terribly broken for you to still want to fix it and improve it. Right? I'm not saying 7th best in the world is good enough for me. We want to get better. But I think that, because the messaging is so divisive, that things have to be ruined and they have to have been ruined by this party or that person or whatever. I think that pushes a lot of people away from getting involved. Because, there's people that don't even want to take a sign because what will the neighbors think? Right? Regardless of party, right? Oh, I wouldn't want to put up that sign.
I'm one of those people. I stopped putting a sign up, was it 2 elections ago? I stopped doing it.
For sure, because people feel like, oh, it's just such a polarized place now. We don't want to get involved that way. What are people going to think if we don't align with them? People have different ideas. That's okay. Right? We all agree on what the challenges are.
Well, I think that's right. Like
it's about how you get to the solutions.
I think the culture in politics has definitely become this divisive thing, and I don't know if it's mainly because of the results of the polarization from the states that's affected us here. But like I grew up like very much in a politically involved family. That was very much just part of public life. Was you support a party and you sit on boards and you contribute, right, to improve your community. That's not the norm anymore. How do you think we can actually get people, I guess, getting away from this polarization? Like, what are the practical steps to getting young people who are so apathetic, who don't have hope for a future because they're worried about, they can't afford a home, climate is a big issue for them. How do you get them to remove this apathy and actually get involved, to actually even just vote?
Well, I think that certainly doing whatever you can to reduce the polarization is a positive thing for everybody involved. I think then also delivering on things that they emphasize as priorities to the extent that they reach out. And that was one of the challenges that I recognized, when I was working on that skate park at 12 years old. Comes back to the skate park, is that, we felt like they didn't want to hear from us. The reality was we weren't speaking in forums where decision makers were present, and we weren't speaking in a way that they understood. So getting yourself involved and then seeing a result come from that is a great way to get people to keep coming back, right? But if they come out to a couple meetings and it's confusing and it seems like nothing's going to happen and they're not getting a chance to speak, that's going to turn people off. So I think you have to deliver on some of their key priorities. You have to make the effort to reach out to them, and you have to emphasize that it does matter when you get involved. I mean, it's mattered to me. It's mattered to, I think everyone who does get involved politically has benefited from it. Just in terms of the impact it has on their community, new resources, investments that they wouldn't have otherwise, and being able to be part of that conversation and help shape what that's going to look like in your community is really important. And that spurs on that initiative to keep coming back. Mm-hmm. And I would just say to everybody out there, it's not as scary as it looks. People are going to be friendly to you. You know, you don't need to be worried about coming out to a council meeting or, you know, coming to the legislature and seeing what we do in Queen's Park. We have public galleries available for people who want to come. And also always reach out to your representative. You know, I represent everyone in the Bay of Quinte, not just the people that voted for me. So I take meetings with people who I know are absolutely not supporters, and I hear them out, right? And I find that often you learn more from the people who disagree with you, right? And so I search out those conversations. I've even had times where staff say, you know, this person can be erratic, they can be loud, you know, we wouldn't necessarily recommend that you take it. I said, no, I want to talk to them. Because, you know, if whatever they're feeling so passionate about, I want to know about it. And even if it's, you know, maybe it's an uncomfortable meeting, that's okay. I don't have the right to be comfortable. Let's talk to everybody. And I think that helps get people, you know, to feel more confident, because they go, you know, even though that person knows I disagree with them, he took the time, he heard me out, and they probably find out that we agree on many more things than we disagree on.
Let's move over to housing.
Sure.
That's the big hot
This is a real estate related podcast.
That's right. Exactly. We care about housing, real estate, and architecture. What in your mind, like, how did we get here? Where did this housing crisis come from? And yeah, what caused it?
Well, I mean, I think there's a number of factors. You know, obviously Canada and Ontario have both continued to grow. We have not kept up building with the pace of that growth. You know, from all sources, you know, domestic growth, international growth, immigration, all those sorts of things. I think that also we've had a challenge getting people to get involved in the trades, and that's been something that's been going back for 30 years. You know, even when I was a kid, there was this discussion about how do we destigmatize the trades? How do we convince people that this isn't just an alternative for people who couldn't go to university, that these are actually good careers? And that's continued to be a struggle, and I'm not sure why, because we know there's incredible careers in the trades, that people make great money, and we also know that, you know, the tradespeople that we have are aging. And so if you're a young person who wants to get into the trades, there's a huge opportunity for you to not only make good money while you're starting out, but to also take over some of these trades-related businesses. And so I think that messaging needs to get out there more, that there are great careers in the trades, and that we desperately need people to be taking those roles. So, you know, that skilled labor shortage has certainly impacted building. And then also things like regulation, taxation. You know, I think gatekeeping at the municipal level, whether that's from NIMBYism or whether that's just because processes are too slow, we know that has a significant impact on builders' abilities to get things built.
And there's also infrastructure on that side as well, which is from the provincial side. Like now in the county, there's a development freeze on because there's no water. Right there. So they're trying to catch up on the infrastructure side so they can actually build more doors. How much accountability then comes on the province for that?
Absolutely. And historically, you know, over a long period of time, you know, there has not been a lot of investment in municipal infrastructure, and that goes back multiple governments. We've certainly been making a great effort to do that. You know, we've put aside an additional $3 billion, whether it's for the Building Faster Fund, the Housing Enabling Water Systems Fund, the Housing Enabling Core Services Fund, the Ontario Communities Infrastructure Fund. You know, there's a number of different pathways that we're able to get infrastructure money to municipalities to help them assist in building more houses. And then there's also, you know, development charges that they levy, which are designed to go towards housing enabling, you know, projects in municipalities that often end up sitting around in reserve banks for too long. And I know that developers have had significant concerns about the fact that those fees are collected, but then those projects may not get underway for quite a long period of time, and that slows down development as well. But we certainly appreciate the fact that you have to have infrastructure in the ground in order to be able to get homes built. And I think that we've been a very good partner to municipalities on that. Still more work to do, but you've seen a number of large, like big city mayors come out and endorse the PCs, you know, strictly because of the work that we've done on infrastructure, including local projects. You know, you look at County Road 49, you know, $20 million investment, which is exactly what the municipality had asked for in their grant. We were able to get that approved. Largest ever infrastructure investment in Quinte West of $11 million for the urbanization of 2nd Doug Hill Road and Highway 2. That'll unlock several thousand housing units. You know, we look at the $18 million for the Wellington Water Treatment Plant, which came through the Housing Enabling Water Systems Fund. So we continue to do that work all across the province, but particularly in the Bay of Quinte as well, and we'll be there to support municipalities on that front.
So on the housing side, I mean, affordability is still the biggest issue here. So whether even you can get a development made, first time home buyers, young people who are trying to get in the market, it's still so unattainable because even the quote unquote affordable housing in a development, which is often defined as like 75% of the average cost of the house.
Yeah, 80% of market rate or 30% of gross income.
It's still unattainable. And even on the municipal side, when they, in the county, they decrease the minimum square footage for a house, it's like, well, great, I still can't buy the land because the banks don't hold mortgages for the land. So you're still SOL. So most people are still forced to rent. Now, Doug Ford got rid of rent control.
Well, home ownership rate is about 68% in Ontario.
Yes.
So not most people are forced to rent. But a significant portion.
Still a significant amount of people, especially young people, are moving forward. That number is going to decrease and continue to decrease as the first home that they're going to buy is seemingly more unattainable. So we do have more people coming into the rental market, or they're just staying at home with mom and dad.
Right.
With the rent control being removed, has that been a main contributor of the increase of rent? Because it's gone up like wild. Is that something that Doug Ford should reinstate to have a bit more regulation on the rental market and thereby affecting the entire housing market?
Well, yeah, I think one of the things that we saw under the previous rent control model, which still exists on older units but not on newer units, is that by removing that and then also leading the charge on getting rid of HST on purpose-built rentals, that created the largest purpose-built rental boom that the province had seen in 30 years. So that actually significantly helped address the issue of availability. Now, it did affect price as well, but we knew that we needed to get more people into housing. We couldn't do that without builders building purpose-built rentals. And so that did really kickstart an increase in rental building, because under the previous rates, builders didn't want to develop anything because it wasn't financially viable for them. And so that, again, causes that pressure on the market because you don't have units becoming available.
Mm. And I think another answer would be fourplexes, right? And the Ford government's doubled down on restricting fourplexes. Why is that, and where do you stand on that issue?
I'm certainly open to it. I know that at the time that that was found to not be a particularly popular form of housing, and so there was concern about the fact that these would get built and then wouldn't be something that the market was interested in. I'm certainly open to having those discussions about any type of form of housing. When I first I first was running for council in 2014, I was very big on tiny homes. That was one of the things that I was bringing to the table, sort of a new, fresh idea. We have changed the provincial policy statement to allow for tiny homes, to allow for modular construction, to allow for more units to be built around transit stops as well. We also effectively cut out about 30% of the planning policy statement and streamlined it, which we expect will save about 6,600 municipal staff hours, which will help get approvals more quickly and get more shovels in the ground. But certainly, there's a variety of forms of housing that I think are viable, and certainly happy to have those conversations about fourplexes in the future.
Is that somewhere, back to what we were talking about earlier, is that somewhere where if your community, the Bay of Quinte, wanted that, would you vote against your party in that?
Well, it's certainly something I would bring to the caucus table and say, hey, listen, this is something the Bay of Quinte is really interested in. Here's why we think it's viable in our area. It would hit a price point of this, which would be affordable. You have to build the case out, right? Everybody wants something, right? And everybody's municipalities and the different ridings want something. So you have to make the case for that. And so that would be a situation where you'd make the case, you'd reach out to other MPPs and say, hey, what are you hearing in your riding? Is this something that your people are looking for as well? And then bringing that to caucus and then trying to get that supported in a government bill moving forward. Mm-hmm. And so certainly if that was something that people were screaming for, which is not something that I've heard during the campaign, but you don't always hear everything at people's doors, and certainly we don't tell them ahead of time we're coming. So sometimes you go, do you have any questions? They go, well, not right now, but that's always something I'd be happy to bring forward. And I have no problems. I don't think that anyone has a monopoly on good ideas. I look for a good idea wherever it might be, and I'm always happy to bring that forward in government. No question.
Let's talk about, speaking of rentals, STA, short-term accommodation, Airbnbs, obviously in the past 10 years now have just increased dramatically, especially in tourist locations like the county. Wellington is often described as a ghost town because of these STAs, and the jurisdiction's been given to the municipalities to control licensing and permitting for that. Is that something that the province should kind of have its hand in to take back the authority from there, or what's the best route possible there when we have all of these empty homes, which do drive up the average cost of housing?
Well, and certainly it shrinks the availability of it, right? You know, those are homes that are not occupied year round, and certainly you referenced Wellington. You know, if you go through there in the winter, obviously a lot of it's tourism, but you know, a lot of empty houses mean that you don't have that economy year round. Now, what I will say is that one of the challenges of being in government is if we said tomorrow we're going to take that responsibility away from municipalities, you would find that municipalities would have an uproar because they'd say, well, you know, we know what we need best, not someone in Toronto. We want to have that control, right? Unless they like the decision that we make, in which case they'll say, this is great and we're glad you did that. So you have to be careful about that sort of thing. You know, a lot of municipalities will want to have that say-so themselves. But certainly I'm supportive of regulation. I was as supportive of it on council as well. And using technology to make sure that we know how many are out there. I think that the self-report system, so the honor system that was initially introduced in Belleville was well-intentioned, but we knew that we needed to follow that up with technology that would go through all those STA accommodation sites, you know, really scrape that data, find out how many are actually operating in our area, and be more proactive. But, you know, you need to make sure that you fund those operations so that they have teeth as well, right? You can't say there will be a fine, and then you find out that only 5% of illegal STAs are actually getting fined. You have to make sure that you go out there and enforce the rules, and so that more people register and that you know how many are operating so that you can effectively design a cap on the total number. But I'm certainly in favor of that because we know the effect it has on communities, not just in terms of the shortage of housing, which is a real thing, and then also the spin-on effects to the economy during those off seasons when you don't have families living in those houses, you know, but also what it does to neighborhoods. Right? If you're the only house that's still on your street occupied by a family and everything around you is STAs, you might be in for an interesting summer, right? You don't know who's coming. You don't know how late they're going to be partying. To them, this is a vacation home. To you, it's your neighborhood. And so it's important that we get that mix right. We get the radial separation right. So whether that's at the municipal level or at the provincial level, you know, I think that it is important. And certainly, you know, on some larger issues, you know, I think that it's important for the provincial government to step in. I know that, you know, Airbnb, when municipalities request the information, they say, well, until it's a provincial issue, we're not going to step in, right? And so if there is enough push behind that, then we will have to come in and say, okay, Airbnb, if you want to operate in the province of Ontario, here are the rules. And I would be happy to bring that forward too.
You mentioned one of the problems with the lack of housing is the lack of tradespeople in our community, because obviously if we need more doors, supply demand, we need to build those doors.
And we got to train people to build them.
That's right. Well, so how do you plan to attract tradespeople to live and work in the Bay of Quinte?
Yeah, so there's a number of things that we're doing. I think one of the best programs that our provincial government offers is the Skills Development Fund. So we put forward about $1.5 billion to train up to 600,000 workers. And for our area, it's really been tooled towards manufacturing through a program called Elevate Plus, which operates through Loyalist College. And that one is a great program because it takes people who may have had contacts with the justice system, mental health issues, addictions issues, and helps get them retrained for careers in manufacturing. But we know that there's a lot of skills development fund dollars going towards the trades as well to get people trained out to be electricians and plumbers and framers, you know, carpenters, HVAC, you know, all of those different trades, concrete workers as well. That are needed to get housing built. And so we'll continue to invest in that program and train up more people. But then again, I think in terms of the promotion of it, you know, I would love to see more investment at the school level. Like we brought the Ontario Youth Apprenticeship Program back to grade 10 so that, you know, kids are able to get started on that trades journey sooner. But bringing in people from the local community that are involved in trades and having open and frank conversations about, you know, here's the salary expectations. You know, here's what opportunities are going to be available to you. You know, here's the pathways to becoming a business owner. You know, go be an apprentice, work for a couple years. You know, if the boss is 70 years old, they're probably looking to transition out. Here's some business coaching, you know, to really have that conversation with kids that they go in eyes wide open, because you can make a lot of money in the trades, have a great career, you know, get benefits, and also get practical skills. I mean, I know a number of guys who are involved in the trades from my generation who said, you know, why don't I get a group of my friends in the trades together? I've bought some land. Let's build a house and sell it. You know, the couple of them did that during the pandemic, and you made hundreds of thousands of dollars per home because they worked on it, you know, with a team of people that they knew who are all licensed tradespeople. And then all of a sudden, they've got a building company. And now they're out there building homes and just designing subdivisions and things of that nature. So we got to get that message across that these are great careers where you can make a lot of money, take really good care of your family, and also develop those practical skills.
And a big part of that is the training, getting people not just
Absolutely.
into the programs, but having the education system
Right.
there to support that. I mean, speaking of loyalists, they're now making 20% cuts across the board. The culinary program is being cut. Trades programs are being cut. How did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's a it's a multivariate and very complicated question. I've had significant conversations with Mark Kirkpatrick, the president of Loyalist College, about the challenges that they're facing, and certainly it's a multi-pronged issue. So one is obviously the base funding. Right, it has stayed the same for a long time in an effort to make colleges affordable for students. Which
you're talking about the tuition freeze.
Yeah, well,
started
base,
by the Wynne government and continued by
the base funding that we provide to all public colleges, about $5 billion a year, that has remained relatively consistent for a long period of time, and so that is a factor, right? The tuition freeze is another factor because we want to make sure that colleges were accessible to people in the community.
But not accessible if 20% is being cut out and the programs are being
so the
shut
reason
down, right?
that challenge exists now is largely because of the federal immigration minister, Mark Miller, and some of the comments that he's made, not differentiating properly between publicly funded Ontario colleges and then career colleges, which do not have the same record and we're often using more predatory practices to bring in international students. And so they've instituted the caps, and when they first did that, we provided an additional $1.3 billion to the sector to help them stabilize. And this was a sector that was producing surpluses very recently, that was expanding programming, that was hiring more staff. So that was a model that was working. Once the caps came in and once that rhetoric started about why you wouldn't come to Ontario to go to college, that dried up the funnel of international students. And, some people say, well, there may have been an over-dependence on international students, but, that was...
I think close to 70% of the revenue comes from
Yes, because they're
tuition,
charged,
right?
significantly more money. But then that helps offset the cost to, local students who want to get a good career and get a good education close to home that's affordable to them. So we know that there will be challenges moving forward because that funnel of international students is empty. The rebound period on that is probably between 4 to 6 years before, really colleges like Loyalist College, St. Lawrence College, some of those smaller, more rural colleges, northern colleges certainly, will be able to bring in that level of international students again. So we will need a solution for them, and we're going to be working on that very closely with the new, whoever ends up being the Minister of Colleges and Universities. But that'll be my first call that I make, hopefully on Friday if I'm back in office, to get that sorted out. Because I know the level of funding that they need, and I know that they don't necessarily need it to come from only one place, but certainly they need an increase in their funding.
So, but it does sound like there is this over-reliance on the international side, and it sounds... Correct me if I'm wrong, but it does sound like that's where you're putting the majority of kind of the blame for this issue, is that now because the international, even the rhetoric or the international student programming has been abused, so now there's all these restrictions coming in. But still on the other side, we have the tuition freeze, which makes it more affordable.
Right.
But when you have the cost of everything skyrocketing over the past 5-6 years now because of the pandemic and whatever other reasons, everything is going up. Does it not make sense then for the province to make up that funding or release that freeze? Because at the end of the day, the money still has to go through, or else we're stuck in the situation we're here now. So is the answer purely just figuring out the international student side, or is there additional funding that really needs to come in, or does that freeze need to come off?
Well, and that's what I said. It could be a multivariate approach. It doesn't have to be just the freeze comes off or just the funding comes up. It could be a combination of those two. They're in need of about 20% additional funding. So you could bring, and these are the conversations that we would have at caucus. But just for interest's sake, you could bring the student tuition up 10% and bring the base funding up 10%. You could do it all on the students. You could do it all on base funding. There's a number of different, you could do it in grants. There's a number of different ways that you could address the funding issues that they have. And I'm committing to go back and do that. I understand absolutely how important Loyalist College is, for our local economy, for the training of all the different positions that we need, whether it's PSWs, nurses, carpenters, the culinary program. And we've been very supportive of Loyalist College as a government, and certainly I have for a long time as well. So as I said, those types of conversations about how we address it and with what measures will be something that we're going to have as soon as we get back in office. But I don't think that a sweeping, some of my opponents' parties are calling for a sweeping one-size-fits-all change. I don't think that's going to be what's needed. I think it'll be more tailored than that, and that it's maybe too broad strokes to just say, oh, we're just going to increase this one aspect of it, and that'll be all that's necessary. Different colleges will need different solutions, and we'll have to make sure it's a balance of, what taxpayers are putting in versus what students are putting in, because we want to make sure that local colleges are accessible, but we have to shore them up and make sure that they continue to thrive.
Mm-hmm. As far as so right before Ford called this election, there has been a lot of funding that has come out for different projects, such as for Highway 49.
Sure.
A lot of people are very critical of the $200 rebate that everyone is getting. In your mind, you've been over there for 6 months now, has that been on the agenda? Has that been on the ticket? Or is this now just, if we get in, we'll get back to it? Like, why hasn't this been addressed? Or did this just, it can't have just came out of nowhere, right? With 20% lacking of funding, that's pretty significant. And it's not just Loyalist College, right? Because we have the entire Ontario college system that everyone seems to be really lacking in their funding there. So why was this not...
And in British Columbia and other provinces
Right.
as well. Because, again, it was a federal mandate that they instituted the caps.
Let's talk about sustainability and green initiatives for a minute. So Ford, I think it's 2018, canceled some of the green funded initiatives for windows for different green products as well. Is sustainability and energy efficient still a priority for
Absolutely.
the Ford government? And what does that look like moving forward?
Yeah, it's a critical priority. And I think one of the things that we did in 2018 is we got rid of some of the contracts that had come out from the previous Liberal government, including like the windmills in Prince Edward County. Because what happened is that previous government had foisted a lot of those projects on unwilling municipalities and was also paying significantly higher, up to 8 times more than market rate, for the energy that was being delivered from those projects. So it was not viable or sustainable, and it was unwanted by the municipality. So we've committed that we're not going to do that to municipalities. We only want willing hosts for energy projects. And we're expanding significantly. We've just put forward the largest procurement of energy in Ontario's history, because we know we'll need significantly more energy in the years to come. And so that's why you're seeing new nuclear development at Darlington. We're in conversations with Wesleyville as well about adding nuclear there, not just with the municipality, but also with local Indigenous leaders, to make sure that that whole community is bought in, and that's going very well. So we look forward to that. But we're really focused from an energy standpoint on affordability and reliability. We're technologically agnostic, so if that energy comes from wind or solar or biomass, nuclear, hydro, whatever the case may be, we're in support of making sure we have reliable, affordable energy for families, for businesses, for everybody. On the green front, there's a number of things that we've done that have had a huge impact. We added 420,000 additional acres of protected land since 2020, which is one of the largest increases of protected land in the history of Ontario. I've been very proud of that work. But then also we've made some strategic investments that have really cut down on some of the largest emitters. Like you look at ArcelorMittal Dofasco in Hamilton, they're a steel producer. And so we put forward about $500 million to anchor a $1.8 billion investment to transfer their coal burning furnace over to an electric arc furnace. That alone will take the equivalent of about 1 million cars off the road in terms of the amount of pollution in Ontario every year, which is a massive step forward. So we're going to continue. We're looking at the Algoma Steel as well to do something similar there. We've also made significant investments into electric vehicle manufacturing and having that production happen here in Ontario, which is great for jobs, but it's also great for the environment, for us to be a world leader in electric vehicles. And really, you look at the fact that Ontario's electrical grid is one of the cleanest in the world. One of the best things that we can do for the global climate health is to make things in Ontario. Because if we make it here, that means it's not being made somewhere else where they're burning coal and using dirtier forms of power, because we're doing it here on our clean grid. So by attracting more investment, it's not only great for the economy, but that means that those things aren't being produced in districts where you would get significantly more pollution coming from them. So if we can build it here, we should be doing that, and that's better for the entire planet. And then making those strategic investments to cut down on those top emitters, not just in steel production, but manufacturing, agriculture, construction, transportation. We're electrifying the GO line. We're increasing public transit, largest expansion in North America, about $70.5 billion. By getting more people on public transit, that makes a big difference. We had a $3.9 million investment here in Belleville to help purchase 4 new hybrid buses, as well as 2 new hybrid accessibility vans as well. That makes a big difference too. So, you have to do it across a number of different portfolios, but we've been very committed to making sure that we're reducing emissions while also growing the economy. And you have to do both.
And are there any funding programs coming through for energy efficiency, like windows and heat pumps? Is that coming back?
Yeah, they're on right now, actually. So you can apply through the Ontario Energy Rebate Program, whether it's doors, windows, insulation, things of that nature. Those are all available and out there now. So if you go to the Ontario website, you should be able to dig that up, and you can get some funding for those projects.
Do you know much about that program? Has it started already, you said?
Yeah, it started already. I think we announced that early January, but I don't have the info top of mind. I wouldn't want to steer people in the wrong direction.
Yeah, no, that's all right. No, I'm excited about that because I live in an old farmhouse, and
oh my goodness,
it's drafty. I have a wood stove because to burn propane in that thing is just
well, I can only imagine
super efficient. So
yeah,
but no, I love being in the country though. So I may look into that, and hopefully it sticks around for a while.
Absolutely.
I want to talk a bit about some housing, nonprofit housing, because with housing being so unattainable, especially for marginalized groups such as our senior citizens, there are some great non-for-profits out there who are trying to convert a lot of these empty buildings into housing and affordable housing, quote unquote. And I know some of I forget the name of them, but some of the funding for those have been pretty difficult to attain. Is there a plan from the Ford government to assist in more of that housing? Like, what's going on that side of things?
Well, yeah, I think that some of the the public-private partnerships that have been very successful in the area, like Altogether Affordable Housing, which is Phil Spry and Bob Cottrell, they did the Home for Good, they did the one on Great St. James as well, and a number of other projects. We're certainly supportive of those. We led the charge on removing the HST on those projects, and also supporting municipalities and waiving development charges to help get those built and help get the price points to somewhere where they do become more affordable. And so there are models that are working, and we're happy to support them as best as we can as a provincial government, working with our municipal partners as well.
Yeah. Have you been down to Pinecrest yet?
I haven't been down to Pinecrest. I was scheduled to go on the day we had the blizzard.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so I was all excited. I was going to go down to Pinecrest. And then, we had like 50 centimeters of snow, and unfortunately we weren't able to do that. But I look forward to touring it very soon.
Yeah, you gotta get down there.
Yeah.
Ken Howe, he's the executive director there.
Yes.
We've done some video with them as well because it's such a cool project. And it seems to make sense for me when you just we have an empty building that's literally just a liability for the municipality. Let's get this turned into some proper housing.
Well, and that is something we address through the provincial policy statement as well, is transforming whether it's old retail businesses or unused government buildings into affordable housing. We've streamlined that process and made that easier to do, because you see a lot of strip malls that are 50% vacant. Why wouldn't we turn half of that into affordable housing? And so we've added some incentives for people to do that as well, and look forward to seeing more of that happen. Yeah, because a lot of retail businesses, are no longer as viable as they once used to be in a more competitive and globalized, but then also internet-based landscape.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that we do have a lot of commercial space that is not being used, and I'd like to see that turned into affordable housing as well, or just housing more generally.
Mm-hmm. So your competitors and their platforms are pushing for the return of government-built affordable housing. That program, I believe, was, I don't know, I forget how long ago that was canceled, where basically the government got out of the business of development.
Yeah, I think effectively 90+% of the affordable housing we have was built in the 90s or before the 90s.
That's right.
So for a 30-year period.
Because for developers, basically, to have affordable housing, it completely eliminates the profit margin for them.
Right.
So is the Ford government entertaining the idea of getting into government-built housing, or is this something that they just want to steer away from?
Well, and we have supported that, particularly in this area through Hastings County, and provided funding for affordable housing as well as through the homelessness prevention plan. I think up to about $800 million we've distributed through that plan to help build affordable housing for folks. We also came out with a new grant for clearing encampments, so that if you were willing to take down encampments, we would provide some funds to build modular shelters for people, and a number of municipalities have applied for that as well. But certainly, that we know that there's a greater need. When I was on the Hastings County Community and Human Services Committee, about 3,400 families in our area are on the wait list for affordable housing. I believe the turnover on that list is about 7 or 8 years. So people are waiting a significant amount of time. And, we want to make sure that people can get housing that's, in the area where they want to live, that's close to where they want to work, raise their kids near to schools and hospitals. And so we'll keep pushing forward on that as well.
Let's go over to tariffs for a minute, because that's kind of the hot topic, especially this month. I think partly why Ford called an election is to renew his mandate in order to deal with these tariffs.
Absolutely.
What is the plan there? Because so far it seems like, just getting into a tariff war really only hurts the people and the consumer at the end of the day. So where's the off-ramp here? How do we get out of this to actually get back to affordability for Canadians?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so I think step one is try to avoid the tariffs coming in, right? And so that's why you've seen those delegations to Washington. That's why we've been buying ads on American television, pitching this idea that we are stronger together. We're the number one export destination for 17 U.S. states, Ontario alone. We're the number 2 export destination for 11 other states. So we know how important we are to the American economy, and also how interconnected, particularly our automotive industries are. And so, even just one-sided tariffs coming from the U.S. would have a massive impact on both countries, because it would drive up prices for U.S. consumers. And we know it could affect about 450,000 jobs in Ontario. In fact, just the 25% on steel and aluminum affects about 35,000 workers throughout Ontario and Quebec. So these tariffs are definitely something that's going to have a huge impact on our economy. And if you look at locally, we're the 11th most vulnerable CMA in the country because of the amount of exportation that particularly our manufacturing and agricultural sectors do to the United States. It's about 27% of our local GDP. So it's a big challenge in this area. So step one is try to convince them not to put the tariffs on. We've also had a number of meetings with, whether it's governors, senators, big city mayors who are Republican, who Donald Trump is going to be listening to. He may not act on what he hears from them, but he will be hearing from them and telling them, why it's important that these tariffs not come in. And they all understand, there's not governors and senators and big city mayors who are saying, no, we think this is a good idea. They agree it's going to impact them, whether it's the bourbon industry in Kentucky or Harley-Davidson motorcycles or, all of the things that we buy from the United States, it's going to have a big impact. So step one, try to avoid the tariffs. Step two is, if the tariffs come, how do we respond? Both from do we tariff them at the equal rate? Do we tariff them dollar for dollar? There's a number of different ways you can look at that. And so we're working through that, on an ongoing basis, because that is going to be dependent on what ultimately is the tariff policy that comes out of the United States. I mean, this is certainly not something we were asking for. It's something that has come to our door, unfortunately. So we're dealing with that in terms of, well, if they do this, then we do that. The next step is, if the tariffs come in, regardless of what our tariff response is to the United States, we know it's going to have a huge impact on Ontario. So how do we shore up Ontario to make sure that we can keep working, that people can keep bringing home paychecks? And so we've put forward a number of plans, including $10 billion in cash flow supports for businesses, $3 billion in offset provincial taxes, the $1.5 billion to retrain up to 600,000 workers. We've increased the manufacturing Made in Ontario tax credit by $300 million, so that more businesses who are willing to make their products in Ontario will be able to do that. We've also put forward $40 million for trade-impacted communities like the Bay of Quinte. So I would be certainly pursuing some of those dollars to help shore up some of our local businesses. And I think that one of the great things that has come out of this tariff discussion, because obviously this is going to have a big impact and it is not a positive thing, is this new sense of renewed Canadian nationalism, this unity that we feel, this new willingness to break down interprovincial trade barriers, which we know has been on the books for a long time. The challenge is it's more difficult than it sounds, right? It sounds like sort of a wave a wand thing and make the interprovincial barriers go away. But when you look at what some of them are, I think about 35% of them, or 35 different pieces of legislation in Quebec that are interprovincial trade barriers relate to language laws. Well, they're not going to change. No premier wants to be caught holding the bag for changing Quebec language laws.
Yeah, a bit of a touchy subject.
It's a touchy subject. So there is work to do on that, and we're going to be doing that work. But yeah, we want to try to avoid the tariffs. If we can't avoid them, we're going to respond to them. And then also, how do we shore up Ontario's economy? But I think from a national level, and we'll see what happens with the federal election that seems to be impending, maybe sooner than later. But we need to have a focus on really, doing some of the value-added products here in Canada, right? Why are we shipping down crude oil from Alberta at a discounted rate to U.S. refineries, having it refined down there, and then buying it back at an exorbitant rate? That doesn't make any sense. We also do that with softwood lumber. I was talking to farmers the other day. I believe they said about 60% of all the pork products that are produced in Canada are sent down to the U.S. to refine. Right? We should be doing that here, and we should be investing in that here. You look at critical minerals, same thing, right? We mine them, we take a raw product, we sell it to them at a discount, they refine it, and then they get that value-added product to sell to the world or sell back to us. We should be doing all of that here in Canada, and I think that between the provincial government and the federal government, when we get a new one of those, hopefully soon, we'll be on the same page with that, and we'll be building in the ability to refine those products here in Canada, keeping that value-added margin here, and that'll go a long way to supporting our economy as well.
What's your long-term vision for the Bay of Quinte? What does this place look like in 10 years?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, certainly we know that it will be older in 10 years. We're one of the oldest jurisdictions in Ontario, and our average age is about 16 and a half years older than the provincial average. So we know that there will be a lot of seniors here. We continue to be one of the best retirement destinations in Canada. So we will need to build in the infrastructure for that, including new long-term care homes, including more home care supports for those people. And then also, improving our hospital network locally as well, because we know that's top of mind for seniors, but also for young families who are moving here. I mean, certainly we're going to continue to expand our manufacturing base. Belleville has done a very good job, as has Quinte West. We know that we have some more work to do in Prince Edward County because that economy is still largely agricultural and then also tourism. We need more manufacturing base there. And that will help offset some of the larger projects that they'll need to do over the next 10 years because it's very hard to bear out those projects on a strictly residential tax base. You need, large employers who are paying into the system as well. So that'll certainly be key. And we have to prepare ourselves for substantial growth. I mean, you look at the Loyalist secondary plan area just over in Belleville off of, between sort of Sydney Street and Wallbridge Loyalist Road. And that area is earmarked for 9,000 more homes. So, we will have quite a job building out those areas. You look at just north of 401 in Rick Brazier's riding, Hastings, Lansing, Addington, Black Bear Ridge. They're talking about additional, I think about 9,000 homes there as well around that golf course area. So there's going to be a lot of building in our future. There's going to be a need for significant infrastructure upgrades in our future. We're going to need to continue to attract good manufacturing jobs, but then also diversifying that sector as well. More tech jobs, more service jobs as well, and not just, service in terms of like, the retail service industry, but, higher end services as well, accounting and professional services. So we'll continue to build that out as well. But I think, increase in infrastructure, we're going to grow significantly. We need to make sure that we're prepared for that. We need to bring in good, high-paying jobs, and we need to make sure that we have the supports for seniors and families, including hospitals, long-term care, and greater educational opportunities here in Bay of Quinte, and I look forward to getting that done.
Perfect. Well, thanks a lot, Tyler, for coming on. Maybe you can tell everybody where to find your information and where they can learn more about you and the platform for the PCs.
Absolutely. So you can certainly go to the Ontario PC website, ontariopc.ca, for the full PC platform. You can also go to tylerallsopp.com. That'll have all of our campaign platform, different information about how you can get in touch. You can also email us at info@tylerallsopp.com. And for the next 3 days, we still have 3 offices open. So we have one at 200 North Front Street in Belleville. We have 469 Dundas Street in Trenton. And then we also have 333 Main Street in Picton. Feel free to pop by. We have some great volunteers there who'd be happy to help you with anything that you need. If you do need any constituency services, I'm unable to be in the Constitut office while I'm campaigning, but we still have staff over there, so you can pop by that office just over in Rednersville and Rednersville Square there. So if you need help with your driver's license, birth certificates, things of that nature, make sure you pop over and they'll sort you out.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Tyler.
Hey,
That's
thank
great,
you for
and
having
good
me.
luck. And I'm sure the rest of the week's going to be pretty busy for you.
It is nonstop all the way until about 9 o'clock on Thursday.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to it. It's the home stretch, and you got to finish out strong.
That's right. All right. Well, thanks a lot, everybody. We're done.